Tonight's going to be on relationships and boundaries, really good topics. And we're super excited that Marisa can join us for our last session tonight. Have you guys enjoyed the first two that have been here? Yeah, it's been really good. Yeah, we're really grateful that Marisa can make it tonight. She's taking a red eye to Toronto right after this to do another Enneagram thing, right, in Toronto? Okay, so we're really thankful that she has the time tonight to do this. I just wanted to highlight something for you guys that our church is doing. We have this Backpack for Kids initiative. So basically you can pick up a tag on the way out. You can fill up a backpack with supplies with this list, and then it helps out kids who are in need to support families in this season. Another thing for the hub stuff, we have 2 seminars coming up in December if you guys would like to come. December 2nd is called Good Grief. So it's going to be lessons in healing and sharing. We have Chaplain Marlette Reed and Dr. Annette Lane, 2, again, really amazing speakers. And, December can be a hard time for a lot of families going through grief, especially around Christmas time. So if you know of anybody or would like to attend that, you can register online. And then December 16th, so 2 Thursdays after that, we have a fraud seminar. So we have some people coming to talk about fraud and what happens currently with lots of stuff with online and some good resources to keep everything safe with that. And then it's Christmas. Woohoo! We get a break. So with that, why don't we welcome Marisa to the stage? And if you guys have any Q&A, we'll do that at the end. And you can ask questions on any of the 3 parts that we talked about.
Oh, that's okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Nice to see you again, or maybe for the first time, regardless of whether you know your type or not. I just want to welcome you to the journey. It can take some people a really long time to figure out their type, and that is perfect. That's okay. You're not doing it wrong if you feel confused. I hope that we can still address some relational conflict, difficult conversations, even if you're still narrowing down your type. It may surprise you that you may walk away knowing your type a little better tonight. I can't make promises. It's not like looking at you and seeing the color of your eyes. It's not that type of a typing, right? It's internal. It's the things that we cannot see. So type is not, I'm going to give you a little pop quiz here. Type is not determined by, yes! All right. So good. That's the most important thing to remember. Top of mind, especially when we're talking about this, because we are going to talk a lot about behaviors. But what you need to be thinking about, and if you take notes or make notes in your phone, whatever, you want to be contemplating what possibly is triggering that behavior. So we're going to talk about all 9 types, of course, and hopefully I can give you some more examples. But of course, the work in finding your own type and owning your own type and doing the work afterwards is really up to you. So just to recap some of the resources I've mentioned before, podcasts are wonderful, not just because some people like to read and others don't. I think it's really good to actually hear tone of voice from other types. So often when we read, we maybe give a different narrator a different voice in our heads, right? And that's the beauty of books, right? Imagination. But it really is good to hear from different types, from their perspective, in their tone of voice. The way that they say things even is important. So I do recommend podcasts to readers and non-readers. Of course, reading is going to be so good because you can go back to it. You can really break down. It's dense. The Enneagram is dense. It's very technical. And there's so many aspects to it tonight. You're going to learn and think, oh my goodness, it's overwhelming. And that's completely okay. You need to give yourself time to adjust and digest the information. So we will tackle all 9 types, but not as in depth as we had the first 2 sessions. So I just encourage you to go back and listen to the recordings if you can, to really make sense of all of this, because there is a lot of technical aspects. The second thing, remember to talk to somebody who either knows their type or came to either one session or all the sessions. It's so good to unpack this stuff with somebody, because not only are you learning what they've gleaned from these times together. But you're also hearing their perspective, and you're learning to share sort of a vulnerable part of your heart, and it's giving you practice. So even if it's in a very casual setting, it's not a formal, like, let's discuss the Enneagram over coffee. Like, it can just be the car ride home, something so simple. It's going to give you practice articulating those things that have been hard to say, but you've wanted to say for so long. Okay, we will talk about instinctive priorities, repressed centers. I know that sounds like a whole other language right now, but it will help you so much begin to identify with where you fall on the Enneagram. We're going to talk about arrows, stress, growth, and there's two more, security and the missing piece. These are really critical. You only have to remember that you have two arrows, but there'll be like a healthy side of that and an unhealthy side of that. So you have 4, but really you only have to remember 2 numbers, okay? It will make more sense when we get there, trust me. And then we're going to, we're going to talk about this probably in all kinds of different orders, but unhealthy habits, love busters. And that is such a untechnical term for ways that we absolutely self-sabotage our relationships and the people that we love the most, you know. You're going to, I'm going to, probably if I don't hear it, I will feel your groaning and your deep sighing when you hear about behavior insecurity. It's not as nice and warm and cozy as it sounds. So we'll get there. Any questions about what we're talking about? So even if you're not in a relationship, this is going to help you because you're going to begin to see the ways in which you gravitate towards people and push people away. Okay? And it'll be great. So these are, technically speaking, the 5 things that will break up a relationship. And they can take on many different forms, just like our types can take on many different expressions. We've got angry outbursts, disrespectful judgments, annoying behavior. I mean, that's a big category. Annoying behavior. Selfish demands, dishonesty. Okay, so right now, I'd like you, if you can, take a picture of it or write them down if you like to write. I do prefer to write when I'm taking notes, but if you've got your phone, you can take a picture and then you can just use that little like crayon app to edit it. And I want you to just mark them. One being the least visible in yourself, that you think you do the least. 5 being the thing that you do that you know really bothers people in your life. And I'm just going to give you, I'll keep talking here, but you just give it some thought and maybe it'll come to you as I continue to talk. But I do want you to do this. This is a really important thing. We all do these things, by the way. There's not like one particular type that just has angry outbursts. We do all these things, but for different reasons, of course. And but the thing I want you to think about is maybe your top 3. So just keep those in mind, and we're going to keep going here because this is where it starts to get a little bit intense. How many of you remember me talking about the 3 centers of intelligence? The gut triad, the heart triad, and the head triad. Yeah, a little bit. Okay, so these are historically, neurologically, there's all kinds of studies on the centers of intelligence, but essentially it's how we take in information. So if you are in the gut triad, you're a doer. You want to take action, and that is seen in the 9, the 1, and the 8. And they typically experience anger. 8s are the most like outright and forthright with their anger. It's most visible. They have big personalities, commanding presence. They like to be in charge. The 1, the anger is often I always forget this word, resentment. And they internalize that anger, and it's towards themselves. Sometimes they can be a bit short or snippy with others. But don't forget that the 1 is the type that has that inner critic. And so even though you feel like a 1 may be criticizing you or judging you or snapping at you, just remember that their inner critic is like 10 times as loud and all day long, and they never get away from it. So sometimes it's just a reaction to what's happening on the inside because all that anger is internal. For 9s, they really try to avoid their anger, and it is like that volcano that is bound to erupt, but nobody really knows when it's going to happen. Okay, so that's the 3 gut triads. Feel free to take pictures as you need to. It will tell you in those little boxes, I'm sorry it's so small, but there's just so much information. It's hard to know. But you will see the arrows. They're the last 2 lines of each box. So withdraws in stress, goes to 4, breaks free in growth, that's 7, and that's the 1. So if you're looking for your arrows and you just tell me what I do in stress, that's where it's the last 2 lines of each box, okay? You'll also notice beside each and every type listed there, like at the bottom of the box, again, you'll see present, past, or future. This is your orientation to time. And this is how we often make decisions. So if you are a person, let's just stick with 1 for now, and your orientation to time is the present, 1s will often make decisions based off of how they're feeling right now in this moment, what they have on their plate right now in this moment. It's not saying that they never think about the past and they're not thinking about their future. They're just more tied to what's happening right now in this moment with what I have in front of me. And that can be very overwhelming for a 1. For 9s, they're tied to the past. So they often make decisions because they have a lot of loyalty to friendships. They're very relationship oriented. They don't really they don't typically like change very much. And making decisions are very difficult for past oriented types. For 8s, they're the ones that will make a decision before anybody in the room even knows there was a decision, let alone a vote. It's often just like an instinctive knowing. They make a decision and everybody's left with lots of questions. It's very quick, very future oriented, looking to the finish line. Okay, does everybody sort of understand the orientation to time? I know I'm just introducing it. But this is how a lot of our conflict breeds. Because, so I use Phil as an example because we've been married. We're on year 19. And we dated for about 3 months and then we were engaged, and it was just really quick. We had about 6 in-person dates, long distance. I mean, yeah, it was wild. We have 3 kids. My daughter was here last week, if you were here. They're 12, 14, and 16. And yeah, we are just, we are living life. Phil is a 5 and I am a 7. And so if you look over to the head triad, we're both in the head triad. 5s are in the past, 7s are in the future. That sounds like a collision course for decision making. Because 7s just want to go, 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 go. They're afraid of feeling trapped in pain. They're afraid of having limitations put on them as far as options go. And they believe the lie that being held in one place is going to limit them, or being in pain is going to limit them. They also don't believe that they can rely on others for anything. And so you'll often see a 7 express in very different ways, sort of looking for that next experience, looking for that next opportunity where they might feel secure or they might feel satisfied. Whereas a 5, don't worry, I'm not going to get too dark. A 5 is really weighing all all the information and all the past experiences. And every time that I told him, let's just go for it. It will be fine. We'll figure it out as we go. And it wasn't fine. He's remembering all those times I told him that it was going to be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And so now he has to really bear the weight of this decision. The funny thing is, we have both already decided that we agree on what the decision should be and all of that. But because we come to the decision from different perspectives, this is conflict. Unnecessarily so, but it's still conflict. Is it giving you any light bulb moments yet? Are you feeling like, okay, maybe I'm starting to get it? I see a few heads, few scrolling fingers. Okay, I'll keep going. All right, in the heart triad, we have type 2s. They're in the present. And they're often like the ones thinking about what they have in front of them, what they're feeling right now, what they have to do still. But it's often the thoughts are not about themselves. They're about other people's problems and the ways that they could help them. And when a 2 moves to 8, it's like they're stamping their foot and they're saying, no more, enough, stop taking advantage of me. When they probably should have said it like 4 steps back and set the boundary in advance. But a 2 moves to 8 in stress. And they have to be very intentional about thinking ahead into the future and what they want and what their goals are. But what often happens is, all of us, we get pushed to our limit and then we set the boundary. Okay, that's very common for a 2. So if you ask a 2, what do you need right now? They might feel like that's a violation of privacy, but they could tell you what you need right now. They know, and they'll probably be accurate about it. In the heart triad, again, moving down. So we're right in the middle now. A 3, they're future oriented, okay? So are you starting to see in each of the centers of intelligence, we have a representative from all of the orientation to times, okay? So there's so many layers. But it's okay. Stay with me. Type 3s, they're always observing opportunities. They feel motivated by ambition. They're gripped with a need to win, and they need to appear successful. Even if they have failed, it is important that others see them as success. And we can judge them all we want, but that is what is ingrained in them. They become extremely asleep to themselves and their typical ambitious life when they're in stress, and they become very analytical in growth, can really struggle with anxiety, but on the healthier side of that, really think of things in light of the data, in light of the truth and what is actually real. Any questions about this so far? I know I'm kind of plowing ahead here. Orientation time. All right, I'll just keep soldiering on. Type 4s. So they observe their own lack. This is always so vivid in their minds. So they walk into a room and they feel like they missed the memo, whatever it may be. Their orientation to time is the past. They're very, very, very tied to relationships that they've had. 4s have friends wherever they go, and they're typically very deep friendships. They feel everything times 10. Remember, I talked about the spectrum of feeling. If a 7 craves experiential, emotional experiences, it's a very tiny, tiny spectrum of feeling. It's neutral to elated and just utter joy. Whereas a 4 is not afraid to feel all of the dark emotions, plus they want to amp it up. If we feel angry, how could we feel angrier and really create something out of our anger? They reach out to others in stress. Isn't that super interesting? So they move to 2 in stress. And in growth, they create rhythm and order and find, okay, it doesn't always have to be chaotic. I can have structure. I can have balance. in the head triad. We already talked about us in the head triad, so I will talk briefly, even though, oh, that color's horrible. Sorry about that, everyone. Type 6. Oh, it's the 7 that's so terrible, sorry. I will talk about type 6, though. They observe the gaps in data. So they're always analyzing. When they walk into a room and they can kind of see where their processes and the procedures were kind of missed and ways that improvements could be made so that everybody would be safer or have a better experience. They feel compelled to test leadership. Like that is their burden to bear. And some take it on with joy and just are, maybe sit back and quiet and maybe ask questions if the opportunity arises. Others will really rise up in a vacuum of power. If leadership needs to be tested, they will take that opportunity with great joy. So as we talked about last week, 6s can absolutely shapeshift however is needed in the group. They're comfortable with anxiety. They avoid chaos. And we talked about how funny it was to hear from other 6 types how they prepared themselves for absolutely the worst form of crime on their way home from a workshop. And everybody in the room, their jaws were just on the floor. Like, how can you live with that kind of anxiety? And the 6s are sitting there thinking, like, what? You guys don't plan this way? It's very interesting how we always assume that other people are processing the world the way that we do. And this is the most important aspect to take with relationships. It is so critical that you take some time to understand how you're wired. And some people would resist a really overabundance of self-reflection. I myself would too, because we can over self-analyze and be over self-reflective, and it becomes indulgent after a little while. But I do believe that we maybe really push against self-reflection so much that it is a huge detriment, not only to ourselves and our relationships, but society. We're really not being or giving our best selves when we don't even know what we have to offer. And so I would argue, again, you all probably know that I am a person of faith, and I do believe that a lot of biblical truth and the way that, a really healthy way of living your life is to live in a kind way. In a mindful way, we could even say. So if a good way to live is in a mindful way, then the opposite of that is mindlessness. So if we never give any thought to the way that we react to another person's judgment or our stress behavior, when we snap at our family members and it causes pain, and maybe it's normal, but it still causes pain, I would argue that that's mindlessness. It's continuing in a habit or a form that is very, very detrimental to our souls. So, yes, let's keep going. Any other questions? I think this is the most critical thing about learning your type is it's not so that you can walk around and have an excuse for behaving the way that you do, or saying, this is my type and this is my wing. And it's a great party conversation starter. Enneagram is, of course. But I think it's really critical that we become a little more mindful in the way that we speak to one another, in the way that we react to the things that come our way. Because if we haven't learned anything else in these past 2 years with the pandemic, we have learned that there are just too many things that are out of our control. But we can understand a little better the ways in which we're reacting. So I believe this is a helpful guide. It's not the only way, of course, but this is a very, very helpful guide. Any questions about either the gut, heart, or head, or what we've briefly touched on with the orientation to time, or really anything on there? Any questions? Nope? Okay. let's keep rolling. Okay, so if you were just to see the orientations to time on a wheel, you're going to see, I see a bit of a pattern, but that's just the way my brain works. I'm always looking for patterns and connections, and if you're a 7, then you might understand. But the future, 3, 7s, and 8s, they're also known as the aggressive types. And I think it has a lot to do with their orientation to time. They make decisions very quickly. They walk into a room. They know where they want to sit. They know what they want to order. They typically have a lot of these decisions made before the rest of us even know that there was a decision. Those who are oriented to the past are very loyal and nostalgic, and they feel the weight of moving forward because there's so many beautiful things that took place in the past. And then the 1s, the 2s, and 6s, they are the steady ones. They're with us here in the moment. They keep showing up time and time again. They're with us in the present. Any questions about that? I know the font was just so small on the last screen, I felt like I needed to give you a bigger picture. Was there a question right here? I thought I saw something. Nope. Okay. Let's keep moving. All right, so here's another chart for you, the Instinctive Priorities. And this is, again, a highlight of the orientations to time, just organized in a different way, and then the Repressed Centers. Okay, so we have Repressed Thinking, and that's the 1s, 2s, and 6s. It's not that these types don't do any thinking, they just have a very specific way of thinking. So the 1s we talked about, they have that inner critic, and if it's not improving upon something, somebody else, themselves, or a process, they're not typically spending a lot of energy thinking into the future, vision casting. That's not a typical, it doesn't mean that 1s never do that sort of thinking, but it is a little bit more repressed. It's a muscle that needs to be strengthened in a 1. For 2s, we talked about they do a lot of thinking, a lot of solution and problem solving for others. They often do not know what it is that they need or want for the future. It's just so hard to articulate. And for other types, that seems silly. Like, how do you not know what you want or need? But I think we need to just stop and take a moment and remember, not everybody thinks the way that we do, right? It's just so important. You're going to hear some things you think, oh my goodness, that is not possible. How could a person think that way? But this is the way the world is. We always assume that people think the way that we do. The 6s are always trying to avoid chaos. And so a lot of energy is spent upon avoiding chaos or catastrophe. For the repressed doing, now this is a very interesting category of types. These are the 4, 5, and 9 in the past. They each have a way of avoiding doing. It doesn't mean they don't do things at all. 4s and 9s and 5s are really cranking out a lot of material, but it's in a very specific way. So 4s, we talked about on the very first week how they're very much innovators. So it doesn't have to be with traditional types of art or, the ways that we would think of a 4. They're often described as a romantic or a melancholy. It can be with numbers. It can be with science. They're innovators. And they love coming up with solutions for other people. And don't forget that they move to 2 in stress. So they have that innate desire to help others. What happens with 4s is that they are so keenly aware of that missing piece that they feel a little bit jaded, a little bit broken on the inside. And so they offer to innovate for others. They do come up with great ideas, but it becomes a little bit like a house of cards. It's becoming beautiful. It's becoming beautiful. and then it just kind of all crumbles. It's overwhelming. They've overcommitted themselves, and they can't hold up the charade anymore. And if that doesn't resonate with you, that's completely okay. But this is what 4s have described to me. It is like a deck of cards that somebody has made into a beautiful house of cards. And it just, at any moment, it could all fall apart. So they do a lot of things, but then it crumbles. For 5s, they love the planning phase of a research project. They love the preparation and the ideas that it will take to make correct observations. Remember, 5s love learning. They have this voracious appetite for a very specific, often niche topic. They want to be the best in their field, and it can be very, very obscure even, but they do want to know the most. And so in order to know the most, they have to prepare the best. And sometimes 5s have a hard time leaving that planning phase and releasing the information that they've accumulated and giving it away. Yeah. What comes to mind for you? I'm putting him on the spot, but... Very good, yes. Yes, so in our marriage, we have kids that are 2 years apart, and 3 of them. And I am a people person. I was home for many, many years with my kids and loved them to bits. But when Phil came home and the kids were like going ham, so to speak, I was just so ready for someone to clock me out, or I don't know. Like I needed my teammate. And Phil was just so happy to be home. He was in his happy place. And so he had his chair. I never thought we'd be the couple that had like his chair and her chair, but it just happened. And he would come home and sit by the window, and the kids and I would be like trying to get dinner ready, but also having a fantastic dance party to Bruno Mars or something silly. And then they want me to videotape them, and I'm like trying to video them and make dinner. And Phil's sitting in the best seat in the house over by the window and just like reading a book. He also read a book when I was giving birth to our very first child. But see, to me it was like painful, like why of all the times? And he is feeling this is the best. I have my family around me. Who needs the hum of Starbucks when you have like a dance party right in front of you? He's in his happy place. He's not withdrawing in his mind. He's not. He is very present. But it's not the kind of present that I expected. And so for many years, I sort of secretly harbored this feeling of, why? Why is he withdrawing? Why is he not engaging? Why doesn't he like to dance? It was really hard for me to not feel that. And so finally, when we were able to see one another's happy place, because it's different for everybody. If your stress type is different than your spouse or your partner, certainly your happy place is going to be different as well. So that is such a great example. I'm so glad you brought that up. I felt like you were feeling something, and I'm glad I asked you. But this is really key to misunderstandings. There were other times, too, that you pulled away to read at family gatherings. And we laugh about it now. He has given me full permission to share these things. Things that I would think are like, well, we don't do that. We don't read at a family gathering. But Phil would, and his family would love it. They would love if you read around, the fireplace and everybody had a book. It would not be offensive whatsoever. So it can be about family of origin, but it can also just be your type. 5s love learning. 7s love partying. But we need each other. It's very, very good for us to have these kinds of conversations, especially not in the heat of the moment, right? Okay, so where do we leave off? Okay, type 9. So 9s, my heart goes out to 9s because they're often called the sloth, the lazy one. And really, that is not the case. If you will look at any of the American presidents, which I don't know if you would or not, we lived in the U.S. I've lived in the U.S. for more. I am Canadian. Let me just clarify that. But I have lived, I think, equal parts now in the U.S. as in Canada. And I think it is quite a high percentage. I need to figure out the exact number. But they speculate that most of the U.S. presidents have been 9s. 9s have to be very diplomatic. They are often known as the mediator. So they are the friend in your life who you can go and just pour your heart out to without judgment. And you leave and just feel so like, oh, I'm so glad I talked to them. And then you find out 2 weeks later that the person you were mad at went and talked to them too, and they were sympathetic to them as well. And all of that feeling of justification is out the door. And they do not mean any malice by it. It is their heart to mediate. It is just their nature to want to keep the peace and not take sides. And as frustrating as you may find that, that is who a 9 is. So if you have a relationship with a 9, please bear that in mind. It's just in their DNA to be diplomatic. And that's what makes a U.S. president, right? I don't really know, actually. I'm not a U.S. president, so. But it is funny that that is the case quite often. Any questions about that? So they're all doing things. They're just repressed in doing what maybe we want them to do, or maybe knowing what the priority is. That is often the case for 9s, especially, I would say 5s too. Yes? Right. Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. So especially an 8, right? Because 8s like to confront and address things. So it's going to be very frustrating. Usually the person who bugs you the most is your next door neighbor on the Enneagram. Is it the person that you see enough of yourself in them that it just bugs you to tears? That's often the case with 9s and 8s. But I was just saying something about, what was it? It's really important. Anyway, it'll come back to me. Okay, so on to the future types. With type 3s, they sense optimistic opportunities, right? They can just sense in a room. They can walk into a room and know how people can connect. And they see gifting somehow in you. And they may be the person at your workplace that just knows how to get the best juice out of people. It is sometimes self-serving, but not always. It's really a wonderful gift. They know what is going to move the ball forward and how to get everybody helping. Maybe not always in alignment, but at least touching the ball at some point in the game. I am not an athlete, so it's very strange that I would use sports analogies, but that is a good way to explain that. The 3 is feeling repressed, okay? So all these types, the future-oriented types, are feeling repressed. They are impeded by emotions, especially negative ones, right? So they're going to feel emotions that are efficient for the moment. So if it's appropriate for them to cry and there's time and, space for that, they will allow themselves to. But oftentimes, 3s can behave like a 7 in not knowing really how they feel about something until days later because they just keep moving. 3s are often prone to heart problems because they do overwork themselves. They don't know when to stop because all they see is the finish line. And they're very accommodating of others. Like I said, they know how to work with others in order to get, the best results possible. And so because of that, relationships sometimes can impede the work. It can slow them down a little bit, but of course they just make time, and there are more hours in the day, and they're, I'll sleep when I'm dead. That's often what a 3 will say. They have so much drive that it's hard for them to rest. And it seems I have cut off my 7 there. But they're drawn to satisfaction. They do not want to be dragged down by negative emotions, because then they would have to sit still and figure out how they feel. And that's a slippery slope. 7s have often experienced trauma in their life, and so they're kind of trying to turn the page on that. That's constantly like the urge to run or to turn the page or a new chapter. It's just a constant upheaval of avoiding more trauma. They can get down and they can get sad, and when they crash, they really crash. It's a great withdrawal. And so that's not something that 7s typically want to do. Yeah. I don't believe so. It's just an interesting fact. Now, the other part of it, too, is that people don't figure out their type till they're 18. So we're looking at the chicken or the egg. I don't know. It's just interesting. I mean, it's not a hard and fast rule, but that's a very good point. Yeah. Excellent question. Very, very important. No, all types can be in relationship as long as they're healthy. The ones that you may want to watch out for, I would say, top of the charts is a 4 and a 4, and an 8 and an 8. They can be the most intense. Yeah. Okay. And type 8s, they confront feelings of opposition, and they may enjoy doing this. They may not be mad at all, but they just love it. They love confronting it. And not all 8s are going to present like a real bully. Not at all. That is not what I'm saying here. But they're not down. Like it does not make them depressed that people disagree with them. Actually kind of fuels their fire. They wake up with a fire every day. It's really interesting. This is what 8s tell me. Their childhood message, it's not okay to be vulnerable. So they're constantly trying to manage vulnerabilities, which is why they can often appear controlling. They want to control you. They want to know everything you're doing, but they are not doing stuff. All those kinds of internal feelings we would have is a way of managing their own vulnerabilities. It's very interesting. And they feel drawn towards intensity. So they're going to go towards the flames. They're going to try and save the world. They're going to try and confront you on, why your convictions are absolutely wrong and not feel bad about it. But I think these are all very important. If you've noticed the childhood message, that may be something you want to sit with a little later. You're absolutely right. I do believe all types are kind of wired to hear something. It's not necessarily that someone imposed that upon you, that childhood message. It's just kind of what we're wired to hear. And so if you're a person who does, contemplate, pray, meditate, however you feel is appropriate for your life, this is a good thing to sit with, to reflect and see how maybe have I allowed that to take over. Like, when did I start believing it's not okay to have my own needs? How am I kind of acting that out and manifesting it in my life? and maybe pray about it, maybe think about it. I think that could be a good exercise. So, I'm not sure, they're not downloading. Hold on a second. I'm going to show you a chart. Oh, no. Okay, well, hidden here in these gray blocks are diagrams of the stress and the missing piece, and then the growth and security. And it's just a mystery now. Sorry about that. I can tell you exactly what they are, but this is what you need to know. Your growth type is the healthy version of that number, obviously, right? Growth is not something that happens organically. It's made with intentional choices over time. Intentional choices over time. So you may be sitting here tonight. I've heard this many, many times, and there's no judgment whatsoever. People have said to me, well, what if I'm a 4? I'm just a really healthy 4. No. Not that you're not healthy. You are. I bet you are. The thing is that if you don't know your type and you haven't intentionally worked on it, there are ways in which we can grow without knowing the Enneagram. Absolutely 100%. But these are things that are just, we're not tuned to be aware of. And so I would just encourage you to keep digging, and you might be a different number if you think you're a healthy version of one type. We just all have so much work to do that I wouldn't, I think it takes many, many years of intentional work to really feel like, okay, I have seen progress. And I think it takes accountability, sharing with somebody, talking with somebody, allowing them to speak into maybe the unhealthy habits that you have formed. So your stress type, and maybe you've put this together already, is also the type that you really need to be a little bit more balanced, a little bit more approachable. So for me, as a 7, I moved to 1 in stress. And this is how I define stress when I'm feeling alone in a problem. There are healthy versions of stress that we need every single day, and it helps us be more creative. It helps us come up with solutions and really think through problems in a different way. But when I have a problem that I feel like I don't think anybody's going to understand how difficult this problem is for me, and how it's kind of my fault, and I don't really want anybody to know. But that kind of stress, that kind of thinking, that's the stress we're talking about when we talk about stress types. Feeling alone in a problem, believing that you need to problem solve alone is a warning sign that you are veering off course and in need of a healthier perspective. So that's why it's really good to know your stress type, to know what kind of behaviors come up for you when you begin to feel like, okay, I am backed into a corner and I'm just not sure. Okay, so this is not healthy, good stress that makes you, give it a little more. Growth is defined by, I can't read that far, when we are finally able to move outside of the constraints of our core fear and create new habits and behavior. So for example, as a 7, I really don't like to sit with things like that aren't fun or that I don't understand. And that's, a little bit immature, right? A lot immature, really. So for me, moving to my growth type is 5. And how wonderful that my spouse is actually a 5 himself. I will avoid, and I might withdraw even. So I might have some of the behaviors of a 5, but I haven't really begun to start focusing in on the work and maybe learning and digging deeper and staying with it long enough to really understand, which is so different from my nature, right? So growth is not something that we would automatically run to because we know, that's my growth type. There I go, being healthy and growing. It's something we really have to practice, almost like you're trying a new machine at the gym and it's awkward and terrible. And then suddenly you do 3 reps and you're like, okay, all right. I'm getting it. It just takes a little time. It takes practice, and it does take somebody coming beside you and saying, no, actually, this is how you do it. Okay, so if you can keep that in your mind with your growth type, it's not going to be intuitive. It's going to be awkward and a little bit horrible, but you need to keep doing it. So if you can come up with a little habit or a way of thinking that is your growth arrow, I think that would be excellent, and you can hold each other accountable in that. So the healthy side of your stress is your missing piece. That is the thing you need. So when I begin to feel alone and I can't problem solve with anybody else, it's just got to be me on my own, I'm in my one space, I begin to do things, little tasks, things that maybe will allow me to process what I'm feeling, but I'm busy doing. I'm busy taking on tasks. Now, it's not all bad. I'm taking care of things for my family and maybe cleaning the house or improving processes. So these things can really work for me, but I have to learn that maybe when I'm stressed, it's not the best time to organize the closet. There are other ways that I can process what I'm feeling without tackling a project. Okay? So I really want to challenge you to identify maybe some healthy ways of approaching your stress type. It's there. It's going to happen. You're going to have stress. You're going to feel all the feelings. But what are some ways that you could adopt the healthier version of that type intentionally, on purpose? And maybe that's something you could plan with your partner. So if the high side of your growth arrow is releasing fear and maybe, taking new steps in a land unknown, ways that you don't normally, color outside the lines. If the bottom of that number is your security type, that is where you are completely overwhelmed and you begin to act out. You have little to no patience for the people in your life at this point. You are near burnout. And unfortunately, this is where a lot of us find ourselves 80% of the time. And this is a really, really important thing to remember, because a lot of people will come to me and say, I think I know what my stress type is, so that must mean I'm this type. But then I have this other behavior. It's really bad. I don't treat my family very kindly. That's your security number. So the underbelly of your growth type, if your growth type was behaving very, very badly, that's how you would act when you are totally depleted. That's our security, and it's called security because you feel safe enough to act this way with the people who you feel would never leave you. So probably only 2 or 3 people have seen you behave this way, and it's hard. It's really hard because it's typically the people we love the most. And sometimes that's our spouse. So this is where it's so critical that we have these conversations and take ownership for the ways in which we try to self-protect, but then we behave very badly. When there is a safe relationship, we may allow ourselves to be seen unguarded, undone, or acting irrationally. This is a sign that burnout is near and rest is required. So with that comes sort of your responsibility, if you see this in your partner, to don't let them push you away, but to just kind of be there. You might not be able to come in too close, but you can be present. And you probably already knew that. That's the funny thing in all of this. Our spouses, our partners know before we do, oftentimes, what those behaviors are, what those security numbers are. And it's hard. Those are really hard conversations to have. But I'm telling you, if you have a way of talking about it, and the Enneagram is great for that, and they do too, that's a start. That's having a conversation. Even if, it's not, you're just talking about your type and acknowledging the behaviors that have been maybe destructive. That's a really good place to start. So on a given week, if maybe we were not crazy stressed out or acting out, completely overwhelmed on a given week. Maybe one day a week, we were just at rest. This is kind of where we would find ourselves without doing any work at all. We might have a security moment 6 times in the week. Stress, that's going to happen a lot, especially right now. Growth is going to be kind of rare, and the missing piece that we're kind of last to acknowledge that we do need our stress type to be that balance when we're feeling a little unhinged. So I would love if you could, again, take a picture or just jot this down and maybe either write down your number for what that would be. Remember, missing piece and your stress type are the same number. So maybe you can name a behavior that you are aware of at this point. And your growth and security type, they're the same number, the high and low sides. And just jot that down. So I know this is a lot. We've covered a lot of ground, and you are here to learn about relationships. And so really what I want you to take away from this is really just owning what you can own, right? We can't heal years and years of hurt in relationship, but we can take responsibility for what's happening right now today, right? So I would encourage you just to identify 3 stress or security behaviors that you can be accountable for, and then be accountable for it. Share it with somebody, your spouse or somebody you're very, very close with. Maybe you're not in a relationship right now and you would like to be. This is the perfect time to just do some work. Become a little more self-aware. What are 2 or 3 opportunities for growth? What are some of the ways that somebody could hold you accountable to really try and learn that new thing that you wanted to do, that course you signed up for that you didn't start yet? Maybe you could try that. Why don't I call you twice a week and see how it's going? I know these things are like easy to say and hard to do, but if we do them, they work. When people come and see me for coaching, this is what we do. We make goals, and then I hold them accountable, and they do them. Not because I'm like mean or very confrontational. I really do not like confrontation. But I think there's something said of having written down your goals and giving it to somebody. I mean, that's a very vulnerable position to be in. But when you give somebody permission to hold you accountable to that, it can only get better. Even if you just make one change, one small change, improvement can be seen. Do we have any pilots here tonight? Any pilots at all? Anybody in the airline industry? Not one person. Okay. So I'm going to totally mess up this analogy, but it has stuck with me so well. When a pilot charts his course, from what I am told, I'm scared now that it's being recorded. But if the plane is moved even slightly, the course is completely changed. The trajectory of that plane is completely changed with even the slightest degree of change. So I don't say that to scare you because you're going to go off course. I'm telling you that when you make an intention for growth and change, and you take that step and say, no, I love us enough to acknowledge my own junk in this relationship, my own contribution to our tension, there will be growth. There absolutely will be growth. I really encourage you to do that. If I could pray for you, I would, but I won't. I am just so pleased to see all of you here tonight. I really want you, more than anything, because I really don't want to put a parameter on when you should know your type by. But I do think just keep acknowledging your behaviors, your stress points. When you let your guard down and you are feeling overwhelmed, be aware of those things, and you will begin to see the pieces of the puzzle move together. I really encourage you with that. You are welcome to message me anytime if you've had questions about any of these sessions, or you're like, I don't know if I'm a 1 or a 6. Like, if you're still questioning, please message me on Instagram. It's just Enneagram and you, at Enneagram and you. And it's only me. I'm the only person who sees the DMs and responds. So it may take me a little while, but I will respond. So please, if you have questions or you want to book a session, you're absolutely free to do that. Sometimes it's good just to talk out everything you're thinking. It's really good. But I would hope and pray for you that you would just have wonderful conversations. This is just the beginning. As you know, there's so much more we could talk about. And thanks for letting me share. But I'd love to take any questions you may have before we go.
Test. Does anybody have any final questions?
Anything at all?
I have one, Marisa. So that missing piece that's referring to your stress point
That's right.
for each number? Okay.
Yeah, a healthy attribute of that type. Yeah. And I will I won't send all of them, but I will send some slides to Josh so he can put them up on the hub so you can refer to them again. Yeah.
Got one over here. Sure, yeah.
Okay, so how did you come to choose this particular approach rather than some personality? Why this one rather than some other?
Yeah, I think because of the potential for spiritual growth. I think that's a really important component. And I do believe that society maybe has moved away too much from confession, if I can say that. And I do think that this offers like a tangible sort of community confession. I mean, we may be saying general statements, but when we hit on something that is true for you, you have that moment in your gut where like, oh, this is a lot. I don't know. So I think there's a health that comes from just talking about really weighty things, intangible things, in a community setting. I think that's really important. And I have felt that other frameworks of personality or assessments have been less tangible. They've been interesting, and they've told me what I'm good at, but I don't feel like I can do anything with that. I feel like this tool shows me maybe some of my unconscious or habitual negative behaviors, and kind of helps me see the warning signs of when that's starting to happen, when I'm falling into those old patterns of behavior. So it's not the only tool, but I think the two things just drawn because of the spiritual possibility, and the community aspect that we can learn from one another and for one another. Yeah. Yes. That there are 18 types? Oh. Oh, typically that's kind of the age of understanding. There are definitely younger people who've identified, like when I was first beginning my certification process and just like listening and learning and had so much playing in the house, our daughter, who is our middle child, she was, 10 maybe? She knew immediately. when her number was being taught. It just clicked for her. And there are types that are like that. We just really try not to type children before they're interested or connecting with it. So yeah, I think it depends on each child, but that's traditionally what is taught is the age of understanding, 18. Yeah. Any other questions? These are great.
We got one in the corner here.
Right. Yes. Yeah, so it's a great diversion from where they typically find themselves, which is focused and more analytical in their more left-brained, I guess you could say. And when they move to 7, it's sort of this hyper. I don't want to say unhinged because that word has been misused, but it is such a diversion from their typical focus. It is interjecting with one-liners and sporadic thinking. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, it's untimely, or timely. Like it actually can be quite wonderful. And like, would you like to share? Well, I mean, I think I share, but I'm sort of disciplining our children one night at the dinner table, and not like too fiercely. I could get pretty fierce, but not like too intensely, just kind of, really being directive. And Phil, I think you had a lot on your plate at the time, just as we always do, but he kept chiming in with these one-liners, like over and over again, and I cannot get my words out with the kids. And we're all just kind of looking at him like, what's going on? Because he's not normally like that. If I am giving the kids direction, he's with me, like he is also giving them direction. And so finally I just kind of stopped and I said, what's going on with you? And he hadn't made the connection yet that he was under, a small amount of duress, but it manifests in all of us differently. That's what's so interesting. We just cannot expect that my stress reaction is yours or Phil's or anybody else's. I hope that helps. It's so unique. Like your stress type is always quite opposite of how you normally are. So, but it's helpful when the other person knows it so they can say, hey, what's really going on? Maybe later we can talk. Oh, yeah. Right. Way of thinking. Yeah.
Phil, can you tell us what book you were reading when she was in labor? I'm just curious.
Yes, I can. It is like a very, very substantial book. Anyway, we laugh about it. It's great. No. Yeah, that is true, but it is a great story. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, so definitely listen when you can, when they're posted, but if you must take a test, and I always recommend listening to podcasts, Enneagram Journey, Road Back to You, Typology, those would be sort of my top 3. Some people love Sleeping at Last. There's so many Enneagram podcasts out there. I would listen on my way to and from work, and it was great. It was like my little treat on the way home. But if you must take a test, take the RETI, which is, you can find that on the Enneagram Institute. I believe it's .org. And that is also the site. I think I've given it to a few of you. That is where you'll find so much information. Like they even have types in relationship, your wings, your arrows. It will literally, you just punch in the type and it'll give you all that. But there is a link on their site for the RETI. It's $12. the cost of 2 Starbucks or whatever. I just really feel like that is the most comprehensive. There are free ones, but the way that they phrase the questions, I'm not a fan, but you can do whatever you want. I do recommend the $12 one because it's just such a small investment. You get like quite a bit of information from that. And then my only other tip for that would be, if you take the assessment, make sure you stay in that same frame of mind. So if you're answering it like you're at work, if you start that way, keep going. Because some people halfway through, there's like 45 questions or something, and they would kind of like get tired halfway through and say, well, I don't know, this question is hard. What if I'm on vacation? What if my cousins are over? What if it's Thanksgiving? Just stay in your lane. Stay with whatever hat you have on to start it with. Keep that hat on the whole time, and that will give you more accurate results. Because self-assessing is really hard. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I've sure enjoyed it. And yeah, please reach out if you have any questions.